Alrighty, so they're currently having a sale at Best Buy on this PC, and it's actually not too bad, considering the prices of PCs have gone up so much. It's really hard to find a decent PC for under $1,000, and this one's actually not too bad. It has an i5-11400F Intel CPU, and that comes with 6 cores, 12 threads. It has a turbo speed of 1 core of a 4.40, and all cores can go up to a 4.20 when it needs to. Um, One thing that this computer will need an upgrade for is the RAM. 8 gigabytes of one stick just isn't enough anymore. If it was 2 sticks at 8 gigs, you could probably get away with a lot, but if you want to play games like Red Dead Redemption, you're definitely going to want 16 gigs for games like that. Even GTA will have a massive FPS boost if you had 16, or just 2 sticks of 8, if that's something you can afford. And then next it has the RX 570 GPU, which is actually really good, and it's actually an 8 gigabyte VRAM, so it means that it can run games at much better detail than the 4 gig, because certain games 4 gigabytes of VRAM just isn't enough. A lot of games are optimized for like the 6 area, so the 8 will be perfectly fine for that. And the RX 570 is good enough to play pretty much every game you can throw at it at 60 FPS. This computer as it is could probably run Fortnite at like 144 FPS. You got 16 gigabytes of RAM, you could probably start pulling up to the 240 area. But for the average game that's a little bit more high quality, like Cyberpunk or anything like that, at 1920 by 1080 on low settings, you could probably pull 60 FPS with this computer, no problem. So that's pretty much all the parts. It has a 512 gigabyte SSD, which is great, good enough to save games. And you can always add another hard drive to this, like it's showing that there's 2 cables going in, so we know for sure that there's at least 2. There's probably at least 4. So you can have the SSD and a 2 terabyte hard drive to save like your basic game, save your favorite game onto the SSD, and try to leave that empty. That's basically what I do on my computer here. I'll just show you exactly what I'm talking about so people don't get confused. So this is my M2 SSD. This is my hard drive, 500 gigabyte, that I usually save all my Steam games on, my 1 terabyte hard drive, and then my SSD, 500 gigabyte, that I use for most of my favorite games. I try to keep my SSDs pretty empty, and the hard drives I don't really care about. They're games that I don't really play too often. As long as Windows isn't saved onto a hard drive with the game you load onto it, it's pretty quick, as long as you have a hybrid setup. So looking at this case, the airflow probably won't be the best. It does have the slot down the side, so that's good. It has one little opening, so that should help with any negative pressures. It does have extra mounting spots for more exhaust fans on the top. I'm not saying that it's going to be a terrible case, it's just not one that I would choose if I was making a custom build myself. The keyboard and mouse look pretty generic, but that's easy to replace and not very expensive later down the road. Comes with an aftermarket Intel CPU cooler, which is better guaranteed than the Intel one. I don't know how they haven't redesigned that thing. It's been like that for years, and it's not good. It's very, very loud. It spins fast. And then, yeah, so if we look at this person's review, because I was curious on what GPU it comes in it, and he got an XFX, which is actually not a bad brand whatsoever. I had a 3080X in that, an R9 3080X, and it worked perfectly fine. And I believe there's really not anyone complaining. PC startup is a little funky, but a couple of YouTube videos, you're all good. So I'm guessing he started it up and didn't know to do Windows updates. It also has Wi-Fi, which is pretty cool. The motherboard is pretty generic and basic. There is no overclocking at all for this PC. You probably can get away with overclocking the GPU, but I personally wouldn't. The RX 570s and 580s run a little bit hot already, so increasing the speeds and pulling up the voltage probably isn't going to be worth it in the long run. I'd probably just leave it how it is. So yeah, for this discounted price that's going on for the next little while, is actually not bad. $850 for a computer that can run 60 FPS at pretty much all games at 1920 by 1080 on mid and lower settings is actually pretty good. And then games like Fortnite and all those high FPS ones, you'll get 144 no problem without even having to upgrade to 16 gigs.